Welcome to the audiobook insights regarding Atomic Habits by James Clear. Introduction. My story. On the final day of my sophomore year of high school, I was hit in the face with a baseball bat. It was not a minor accident. As I was standing on the mound, the batter took a full swing. The bat slipped out of his hands and it struck me directly between the eyes. The impact crushed my nose into a distorted U shape. The collision sent the soft tissue of my brain slamming into the inside of my skull. Immediately, a wave of swelling surged throughout my head. In a fraction of a second, I had a broken nose, multiple skull fractures, and 2 shattered eye sockets. I do not remember the moment of impact. My memory picks up when I was being helped off the field, realizing something was wrong but not understanding the severity. It wasn't until I arrived at the nurse's office and attempted to answer questions that the damage became clear. "What year is it?" "1998, I said. It was actually 2002. "Who is the president?" "Bill Clinton," I said. The correct answer was George W. Bush. My brain was shutting down. I lost consciousness and began to seize. The ambulance ride and the subsequent hours at the hospital were a blur of induced comas and ventilators. I had lost the ability to breathe on my own. My parents, who had been watching the game, were now beside a hospital bed where a priest was being called to administer last rites. This was the rock bottom that eventually laid the foundation for everything written in this book. My recovery was slow and painful. I was released from the hospital but couldn't drive for months. I suffered from double vision and seizures. The game of baseball, which had been the center of my life, was taken away from me for a year. When I finally returned to the field, I was not the same player. I was cut from the varsity team as a junior and relegated to play with the sophomores. It was humiliating.
However, it was during these years of struggle that I learned the vital lesson that would define my career. Small improvements add up. After high school, I went to Denison University. It was a new beginning. I decided that while I couldn't control the injury or the lost time, I could control my habits. I started small. I made it a habit to keep my room neat. I made it a habit to go to bed early. I started lifting weights. These were not earth-shattering changes. They were tiny victories. But in the chaos of my life, they gave me a sense of control. As my peers stayed up late and let their health slide, I built a foundation of discipline. The grades followed. The physical strength followed. By my senior year at Denison, I was named the top male athlete at the university and named to the ESPN Academic All-America team. I mention this not to brag, but to illustrate a point. I was not born a natural talent. I did not have a gift that exempted me from struggle. I simply employed a strategy of small, consistent improvements. This concept is what I call the aggregation of marginal gains. It is the philosophy of searching for a tiny margin of improvement in everything you do. We often convince ourselves that massive success requires massive action. Whether it is losing weight, building a business, or writing a book, we put pressure on ourselves to make some earth-shattering improvement that everyone will talk about. Meanwhile, improving by 1% isn't particularly notable. Sometimes it isn't even noticeable, but it can be far more meaningful, especially in the long run. The math works like this. If you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. What starts as a small win or a minor setback accumulates into something much more. This brings us to the core concept and the title of this book, Atomic Habits.
When we hear the word atomic, we often think of nuclear power, something massive and explosive. But the word has other meanings. An atom is a small amount of a thing, the single irreducible unit of a larger system, and yes, the source of immense energy or power. An atomic habit is a little habit that is part of a larger system. Just as atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. Habits are like the atoms of our lives. Each one is a fundamental unit that contributes to your overall improvement. At first, these tiny routines seem insignificant, but soon they build on each other and fuel bigger wins that multiply to a degree that far outweighs the cost of their initial investment. They are both small and mighty. This book is not an academic research paper. It is an operating manual. The backbone of this book is my 4-step model of habits: cue, craving, response, and reward, and the 4 laws of behavior change that evolve out of these steps. If you have ever felt that you are struggling to change your habits, the problem is not you. The problem is your system. Bad habits repeat themselves again and again, not because you don't want to change, but because you have the wrong system for change. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. In the chapters that follow, I will share a plan for building a better system. We will explore the surprising power of atomic habits, how they shape your identity, and exactly how to implement the 4 laws of behavior change to create the life you want.
The fundamentals, why tiny changes make a big difference. Chapter 1, the surprising power of atomic habits. We begin with a story from the world of professional cycling. For 110 years, British cycling had been the definition of mediocrity. Since 1908, British riders had won just a single gold medal at the Olympic Games. In the Tour de France, the most prestigious race in the world, they had fared even worse. In 110 years, no British cyclist had ever won the event. The reputation was so poor that one top bike manufacturer in Europe refused to sell bikes to the team because they were afraid it would hurt their sales if other professionals saw the British using their gear. Then, in 2003, everything changed. The organization hired a man named Dave Brailsford as the new performance director. Brailsford was different from previous coaches. He was relentless in his commitment to a strategy he called the aggregation of marginal gains. The philosophy was simple. If you broke down everything you could think of that goes into riding a bike and then improved it by just 1%, you would get a significant increase when you put them all together. Brailsford and his team began by making small adjustments you might expect from a professional cycling team. They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for better grip. They asked riders to wear electrically heated overshorts to maintain ideal muscle temperature. But they didn't stop there. They went deeper. They tested different massage gels to see which led to the fastest muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon to teach each rider the best way to wash their hands to reduce the chances of catching a cold. They determined the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for each rider.
They even painted the inside of the team truck white, which helped them spot little bits of dust that could degrade the performance of the finely tuned bikes. To the outside world, these seemed like trivial, obsessive details. A better pillow, hand-washing techniques. How could this possibly lead to a Tour de France victory? But the math holds up. 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team dominated the road and track cycling events at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, winning 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years later, when the Olympics came to London, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. That same year, Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France. The next year, his teammate Chris Froome won the race, and he would go on to win again in 2015, 2016, and 2017. In a 10-year span, from 2007 to 2017, British cyclists won 178 world championships and 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals, and captured 5 Tour de France victories. How does this happen? How do ordinary people achieve such extraordinary feats? It is the math of small improvements. It is the logic of atomic habits. We tend to dismiss small changes because they don't seem to matter very much in the moment. If you save a little money now, you're not a millionaire. If you go to the gym for 3 days in a row, you're not in shape. We make a few changes, but the results never seem to come quickly, so we slide back into our old routines. But while a 1% improvement is not notable, it can be far more meaningful in the long run. The difference a tiny improvement can make over time is astounding. Here's how the math works. If you can get 1% better each day for 1 year, you will end up 37 times better by the time you are done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you will decline nearly down to 0.
Your habits can compound against you, or they can compound for you. Positive compounding works in productivity, knowledge, and relationships. Negative compounding works in stress, negative thoughts, and outrage. This leads us to a difficult concept to grasp: the plateau of latent potential. Imagine that you have an ice cube sitting on the table in front of you. The room is cold, 25 degrees. You want the ice to melt. You slowly heat up the room. 26 degrees, 27, 28. The ice cube is still sitting there. 29, 30, 31. Still nothing has happened. Then 32 degrees. The ice begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increases before it, has unlocked a huge change. Complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you heated it from 25 to 31 degrees. Your work was not wasted. It is just being stored. All the action happens at 32 degrees. When you finally break through the plateau of latent potential, people will call it an overnight success. They only see the melting. They didn't see the heating. This brings us to the most critical distinction in this chapter: the difference between goals and systems. We are taught that the best way to achieve what we want in life, getting into better shape, building a successful business, relaxing more, is to set specific, actionable goals. But James Clear argues that results have very little to do with the goals you set and nearly everything to do with the systems you follow. What is the difference? A goal is the result you want to achieve. A system is the process that leads to those results. If you are a coach, your goal might be to win a championship. Your system is the way you recruit players, manage your assistant coaches, and conduct practice. If you are an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business.
Your system is how you test product ideas, hire employees, and run marketing campaigns. The question is, if you completely ignored your goals and focused only on your system, would you still succeed? The answer is yes. There are 4 major problems with goals. Problem 1. Winners and losers have the same goals. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal. Every candidate wants to get the job. If successful and unsuccessful people share the same goals, then the goal cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. Problem 2. Achieving a goal is only a momentary change. Imagine you have a messy room and you set a goal to clean it. If you summon the energy to clean it, then for now you have a clean room. But if you maintain the same sloppy habits that led to a messy room in the first place, you will be looking at a new pile of clutter in a few days. You treated a symptom without addressing the cause. Problem 3. Goals restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is this: once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy. The problem with a goals-first mentality is that you're continually putting off happiness until the next milestone. Furthermore, goals create an either-or conflict. Either you achieve your goal and are successful, or you fail and you are a disappointment. You mentally box yourself into a narrow version of happiness. Problem 4. Goals are at odds with long-term progress. A goal-oriented mindset can create a yo-yo effect. Many runners work hard for months, but as soon as they cross the finish line of the marathon, they stop training. The race is no longer there to motivate them. True long-term thinking is goalless thinking. It's not about any single accomplishment. It is about the cycle of endless refinement and continuous improvement. Ultimately, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
Chapter 2. How your habits shape your identity and vice versa. Why is it so easy to repeat bad habits and so hard to form good ones? Few things can have a more powerful impact on your life than improving your daily habits. And yet, it is likely that this time next year, you will be doing the same thing rather than something better. It often feels like keeping a good habit going for more than a few days is a Herculean task, requiring massive amounts of willpower. James Clear argues that changing our habits is challenging for 2 reasons. 1, we try to change the wrong thing, and 2, we try to change our habits in the wrong way. This chapter addresses the first point, the wrong thing. To understand this, imagine that behavior change is like an onion. It has layers. The first layer is changing your outcomes. This level is concerned with changing your results: losing weight, publishing a book, winning a championship. Most of the goals you set are associated with this level of change. The second layer is changing your process. This level is concerned with changing your habits and systems, implementing a new routine at the gym, decluttering your desk for better workflow, developing a meditation practice. Most of the habits you build are associated with this level. The third and deepest layer is changing your identity. This level is concerned with changing your beliefs, your worldview, your self-image, your judgments about yourself and others. Most of the beliefs, assumptions, and biases you hold are associated with this level. Outcomes are about what you get. Processes are about what you do.
Identity is about what you believe. The mistake most people make is that they focus on the outcome. They look at the outer layer of the onion. They think, I want to be skinny, outcome. And if I stick to this diet, process, then I'll be skinny. They ignore the center of the onion, the identity. They ignore the beliefs that drive their current actions.
Clear calls this outcome-based habits. The alternative is identity-based habits. With outcome-based habits, the focus is on what you want to achieve. With identity-based habits, the focus is on who you wish to become. Consider two people resisting a cigarette. When offered a smoke, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." It sounds like a reasonable response, but it is a flawed one. This person still believes they are a smoker who is trying to be something else. They are hoping their behavior will change while carrying around the same beliefs. The second person declines by saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It's a small difference, but the shift in identity is massive. "I'm not a smoker" signals a shift in identity. Smoking was part of their former life, not their current one. They no longer identify as someone who smokes. Most people don't even consider identity change when they set out to improve. They just think, I want to be skinny, outcome. And if I stick to this diet, then I'll be skinny, process. They set goals and determine the actions to achieve those goals without considering the beliefs that drive their actions. They never shift the way they look at themselves, and they don't realize that their old identity can sabotage their new plans for change. Behind every system of actions are a system of beliefs. The system of a democracy is founded on beliefs like freedom, majority rule, and social equality. The system of a dictatorship is founded on a different set of beliefs, like absolute authority and strict obedience. You can imagine many ways to try to get more people to vote in a democracy, but such behavior change would never get off the ground in a dictatorship. That is not the identity of the system. Voting is a behavior that is impossible under a certain set of beliefs. The same is true for you.
You may want more money, but if your identity is someone who consumes rather than creates, then you'll continue to be pulled towards spending rather than earning. You may want better health, but if you continue to prioritize comfort over accomplishment, you'll be drawn to relaxing rather than training. It's hard to change your habits if you never change the underlying beliefs that led to your past behavior. You have a new goal and a new plan, but you haven't changed who you are. This is why true behavior change is identity change. You might start a habit because of motivation, but the only reason you'll stick with one is that it becomes part of your identity. Anyone can convince themselves to visit the gym or eat healthy once or twice, but if you don't shift the belief behind the behavior, then it is hard to stick with long-term changes. Improvements are only temporary until they become part of who you are. The goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to learn an instrument. The goal is to become a musician. Your behaviors are usually a reflection of your identity. What you do is an indication of the type of person you believe that you are, either consciously or non-consciously. Research has shown that once a person believes in a particular aspect of their identity, they are more likely to act in alignment with that belief. For example, people who identified as being a voter were more likely to vote than those who simply claimed voting was an action they wanted to perform. Similarly, the person who incorporates exercise into their identity doesn't have to talk themselves into training. Doing the right thing is easy. After all, when your behavior and your identity are fully aligned, you are no longer pursuing behavior change. You are simply acting like the type of person you already believe yourself to be. But where do your beliefs come from?
How is your identity formed? And how can you emphasize new aspects of your identity that serve you and gradually erase the pieces that hinder you? This brings us to the core mechanism of the book, the feedback loop. Your identity is not set in stone. You have a choice. You have the power to change your beliefs about yourself. Your identity emerges out of your habits. You are not born with preset beliefs. Every belief, including those about yourself, is learned and conditioned through experience. More precisely, your habits are how you embody your identity. When you make your bed each day, you embody the identity of an organized person. When you write each day, you embody the identity of a creative person. When you train each day, you embody the identity of an athletic person. The word identity was originally derived from the Latin words essentitas, which means being, and identidem, which means repeatedly. Your identity is literally your repeated being. Whatever your identity is right now, you only believe it because you have proof of it. If you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you have evidence that you are religious.
If you study biology for 1 hour every night, you have evidence that you are studious. If you go to the gym even when it's snowing, you have evidence that you are committed to fitness. The more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly you will believe it. This is why habits are so important. It is not just about getting results, it is about changing your self-image. The process of building habits is actually the process of becoming yourself. This is a gradual evolution. We do not change by snapping our fingers and deciding to be someone entirely new. We change bit by bit, day by day, habit by habit. We are continually undergoing micro-evolutions of the self. Each habit is like a suggestion. Hey, maybe this is who I am. If you finish a book, then perhaps you are the type of person who likes reading.
If you go to the gym, then perhaps you are the type of person who likes exercise. If you practice playing the guitar, perhaps you are the type of person who likes music. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. This is one reason why meaningful change does not require radical change. Small habits can make a meaningful difference by providing evidence of a new identity. And if a change is meaningful, it is actually big. That's the paradox of making small improvements. The most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do. Clear outlines a simple two-step process. Decide the type of person you want to be. Prove it to yourself with small wins. First, decide who you want to be. This holds at any level, as an individual, as a team, as a community, as a nation. What do you want to stand for? What are your principles and values? Who do you wish to become? These are big questions, and many people aren't sure where to begin. But they do know what kind of results they want. To get six-pack abs, or to feel less anxious, or to double their salary. That's fine. Start there and work backward from the results to the type of person who could get those results. Ask yourself, who is the type of person that could get the outcome I want? Who is the type of person that could lose 40 pounds? Who is the type of person that could learn a new language? Who is the type of person that could run a successful startup? For example, who is the type of person who could write a book? It's probably someone who is consistent and reliable. So your focus shifts from writing a book, outcome-based, to being the type of person who is consistent and reliable, identity-based. Once you have a handle on the type of person you want to be, you can begin taking small steps to reinforce your desired identity.
If you want to be a writer, you write 1,000 words. You vote for that identity. If you want to be a healthy person, you choose the salad over the fries. You vote for that identity. You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election. You just need a majority. It doesn't matter if you cast a few votes for a bad behavior or an unproductive habit. Your goal is simply to win the majority of the time. This concept of identity-based habits is the introduction to another key theme in the book, feedback loops. Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits. It's a two-way street. The formation of all habits is a feedback loop, but it's important to let your values, principles, and identity drive the loop rather than your results. The focus should always be on becoming that type of person, not getting a particular outcome. Ultimately, your habits matter because they help you become the type of person you wish to be. They are the channel through which you develop your deepest beliefs about yourself. Quite literally, you become your habits.
Chapter 3. How to Build Better Habits in 4 Simple Steps. In 1898, a psychologist named Edward Thorndike conducted an experiment that would lay the foundation for our understanding of how habits are formed. Thorndike was interested in the behavior of animals, specifically cats. He designed an operational device known as a puzzle box. The box was designed to be a confined space where the cat could only escape by performing a specific action, such as pulling a loop of cord, pressing a lever, or stepping on a platform. Once the cat triggered the mechanism, the door would spring open, and the cat could dart out to a bowl of food waiting just outside. Thorndike would place a hungry cat inside the box and observe. At first, the behavior of the animals was random and chaotic. They would sniff the corners, stick their paws through the gaps, and claw at the walls. They were simply trying to get out. Eventually, usually by accident, the cat would stumble upon the magical lever. The door would pop open, and the cat would escape and eat. Thorndike tracked how long it took for each cat to escape. In the beginning, it might take a few minutes. But as he repeated the experiment with the same cat, something interesting happened. The cat stopped making random movements. It stopped sniffing the corners.
It went straight to the lever. After 20 or 30 trials, the behavior became so automatic that the cat could escape in just a few seconds. Thorndike described this learning process with a principle he called the law of effect. Behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, and those that produce unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated. This is the biological and psychological basis of all habits. A habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. The process of habit formation begins with trial and error. Whenever you encounter a new situation in life, your brain has to make a decision. How do I respond to this?
In this initial stage, the brain is working hard. It is analyzing the situation, processing sensory data, and trying to figure out the solution. This requires a massive amount of neurological activity. But once you stumble upon a solution, like the cat stumbling upon the lever, the brain makes a note. It says essentially, hey, next time you are in this box, just press the lever. Don't worry about the corners. As the habit is formed, the mental activity decreases. You don't have to think about how to tie your shoes anymore. You don't have to think about how to back your car out of the driveway. Your brain skips the trial and error and goes straight to the solution. This is why habits are useful. The primary purpose of habits is to solve the problems of life with as little energy and effort as possible. Some people worry that building habits will make them robotic or dull. They worry that a structured life will kill their spontaneity. James Clear argues the exact opposite. Habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. If you are always forced to make decisions about simple tasks, when should I work out, what should I eat, when do I pay the bills, then you have less mental energy for creativity and freedom. It is only by making the fundamentals of life easier that you can create the mental space for free thinking. To understand how to build these habits, we need to break down the process into its component parts. Clear introduces a four-step framework that refines the earlier models of habit formation. This is the backbone of the entire book. The four steps are cue, craving, response, reward. This pattern is known as the habit loop. It happens in a split second, and it governs almost everything you do. First, there is the cue. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a bit of information that predicts a reward. Our prehistoric ancestors were paying attention to cues that signaled the location of primary rewards, like food, water, and sex.
Today, we spend most of our time learning cues that predict secondary rewards, like money and fame, power and status, praise and approval, love and friendship, or a sense of personal satisfaction. Your mind is continuously analyzing your internal and external environment for hints of where rewards are located. Because the cue is the first indication that we're close to a reward, it naturally leads to a craving. Second, there is the craving. Cravings are the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of motivation or desire, without craving a change, we have no reason to act. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You do not crave smoking a cigarette, you crave the feeling of relief it provides. You are not motivated by brushing your teeth, you are motivated by the feeling of a clean mouth. You do not want to turn on the television, you want to be entertained. Every craving is linked to a desire to change your internal state. Third, there is the response. The response is the actual habit you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Whether a response occurs depends on how motivated you are and how much friction is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you are willing to expend, then you won't do it. Your response also depends on your ability. It sounds simple, but a habit can only occur if you are capable of doing it. If you want to dunk a basketball but can't jump high enough, well, you're out of luck. Finally, there is the reward. Rewards are the end goal of every habit. The cue is about noticing the reward. The craving is about wanting the reward. The response is about obtaining the reward. We chase rewards because they serve two purposes. They satisfy us, they teach us. The first purpose is immediate. Food satisfies hunger. The promotion satisfies the craving for status. The second purpose is long-term. Your brain is a reward detector.
As you go about your life, your sensory nervous system is continuously monitoring which actions satisfy your desires and deliver pleasure. Feelings of pleasure and disappointment are part of the feedback mechanism that helps your brain distinguish useful actions from useless ones. Rewards close the feedback loop and complete the habit cycle. If a behavior is insufficient in any of the four stages, it will not become a habit. Eliminate the cue, and your habit will never start. Reduce the craving, and you won't experience enough motivation to act. Make the behavior difficult, and you won't be able to do it. And if the reward fails to satisfy your desire, then you'll have no reason to do it again in the future. Without the first three steps, a behavior will not occur. Without all four, a behavior will not be repeated. We can split these four steps into two phases: the problem phase and the solution phase. The problem phase includes the cue and the craving. This is when you realize that something needs to change. The solution phase includes the response and the reward. This is when you take action and achieve the change you desire. All behavior is driven by the desire to solve a problem. Sometimes the problem is that you notice something good and you want to obtain it. Sometimes the problem is that you are experiencing pain and you want to relieve it. Let's look at a specific example. Problem phase. Cue. Your phone buzzes with a new text message. Craving. You want to learn the contents of the message. Solution phase. Response. You grab your phone and read the text. Reward. You satisfy your craving to read the message. Grabbing your phone becomes associated with your phone buzzing. This framework, cue, craving, response, reward, allows us to create a practical set of rules for building good habits and breaking bad ones. James Clear calls these the 4 laws of behavior change. To build a good habit, the first law, cue, make it obvious. The second law, craving, make it attractive.
The third law, response, make it easy. The fourth law, reward, make it satisfying. To break a bad habit, we simply invert these laws. Inversion of the first law, cue, make it invisible. Inversion of the second law, craving, make it unattractive. Inversion of the third law, response, make it difficult. Inversion of the fourth law, reward, make it unsatisfying. In the following chapters, we will dive deep into each of these laws, exploring the psychology behind them and how to apply them to your daily life.
The first law, make it obvious. Chapter 4, the man who didn't look right. We begin the exploration of the first law with a story that illustrates the immense, often invisible power of the human brain to recognize patterns. The psychologist Gary Klein tells the story of a paramedic who attended a family gathering. During the party, she looked at her father-in-law and felt a sudden jolt of concern. She didn't know why, but something about him terrified her. She looked at him and said, "I don't like the way you look." Her father-in-law, who felt perfectly fine, jokingly asked what she meant. She insisted. She said, "No, I need you to go to the hospital now." A few hours later, the man was undergoing life-saving surgery. He had been in the early stages of a major heart attack. How did she know? Did she have superpowers? No. She had experience. After years of working as a paramedic, her brain had unconsciously built a database of what a heart attack looks like. She had seen the pattern hundreds of times. She had internalized the way the skin changes color, the way the sweat gathers on the forehead, the way the distribution of blood flow changes in the face. When she looked at her father-in-law, her brain recognized the pattern instantly. She couldn't articulate the specific details. She couldn't say, "I see a constriction in your capillaries," but she could feel the result. The intuition was just habit in disguise. This story highlights a crucial fact about our habits. We don't always know we are doing them. Over time, the cues that spark our habits become so common that they become invisible. The treats on the kitchen counter, the remote control on the couch, the phone in our pocket. Our responses to these cues are so deeply encoded that we don't even realize we are responding. We go into autopilot. This is the greatest challenge in changing habits. You cannot change a habit if you are unaware that it exists. Before we can build new habits, we must get a handle on our current ones.
We need to raise our non-conscious behaviors to the level of conscious awareness. To solve this problem, James Clear looks to the Japanese railway system. Japan's train system is regarded as one of the best in the world. If you ever ride a train in Tokyo, you will notice that the conductors have a peculiar habit. As they run the train, they are constantly pointing at things and calling out commands. When the train approaches a signal, the operator will point at it and say, "Signal is green." When the train pulls into a station, the operator points at the speedometer and calls out the exact speed. When it is time to leave, the conductor points at the timetable and states the time. Out on the platform, other employees are pointing at the edge of the platform and declaring, "All clear." This process is known as pointing and calling. In Japanese, it is called shisa kanko. It looks silly to the outside observer. Why point at a light and say it is green? You can see it is green. But the system works. Pointing and calling reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts accidents by 30%. The reason it works is that it raises the level of awareness from a non-conscious habit to a more conscious level. Because the train operators are required to use their eyes, their hands, their mouths, and their ears, they are more likely to notice problems before they occur. They are forcing themselves to disengage autopilot. We can adapt this strategy for our own lives. The first step to changing bad habits is to be on the lookout for them. If you want to stop eating junk food, but you mindlessly grab a cookie every time you walk into the break room, you are trapped in a non-conscious loop. You can use a version of pointing and calling to break the loop. The next time you catch yourself reaching for the cookie, say it out loud. Say, "I am about to eat this cookie, but I don't need it. Eating it will cause me to gain weight and hurt my health."
Hearing your bad habits spoken aloud makes the consequences seem more real. It adds weight to the action. It pulls you out of the mindless drift and forces you to acknowledge what you are actually doing. But before we can point and call specific habits, we need a general inventory. Clear suggests an exercise called the Habits Scorecard. This is a simple exercise you can do right now. You take a piece of paper and make a list of your daily habits. Start from the moment you wake up. Wake up, turn off alarm, check phone, go to bathroom, weigh myself, brush teeth, floss teeth, put on deodorant, hang up towel, get dressed, make coffee, and so on. Continue the list until you have mapped out your entire day. Once you have a full list, look at each behavior and ask yourself, is this a good habit, a bad habit, or a neutral habit? If it is a good habit, meaning it serves your long-term goals, write a plus sign next to it. If it is a bad habit, meaning it works against your long-term goals, write a minus sign next to it. If it is a neutral habit, like getting dressed or brushing your teeth, write an equal sign. The purpose of the habit scorecard is not to change anything yet. The goal is simply to observe. Do not judge yourself. Do not criticize yourself for having too many minus signs. Just watch. Imagine you are a naturalist observing a species in the wild. You are just tracking data. Oh, look, he is checking his phone again. Oh, look, she is biting her nails. The first step to changing anything is awareness. The process of behavior change always starts with awareness. You need to know what you are doing before you can start doing something else. Once you have your scorecard, you will see the patterns, you will see the cues, and once you make the invisible visible, you are finally ready to apply the first law of behavior change.
Chapter 5. The Best Way to Start a New Habit. In 2001, researchers in Great Britain began working with 248 people to build better exercise habits over the course of 2 weeks. The subjects were divided into 3 groups. The first group was the control group. They were simply asked to track how often they exercised. The second group was the motivation group. They were asked to track their workouts, but they were also forced to read some material on the benefits of exercise. The researchers explained to them how exercise could reduce the risk of coronary heart disease and improve heart health. The third group was the planning group. They received the same motivational presentation as the second group, but they were also asked to formulate a specific plan for when and where they would exercise. They had to complete the following sentence. During the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on day, at time, in place. The results were startling. In the first and second groups, 35 to 38% of people exercised at least once per week. Surprisingly, the motivational presentation given to the second group had no meaningful impact on their behavior. Motivation did not work. But in the third group, the planning group, 91% of people exercised at least once per week. By simply writing down a plan that said exactly when and where they intended to act, they more than doubled their success rate. The sentence they filled out is what psychologists call an implementation intention. It is a plan you make beforehand about when and where to act. That is how you intend to implement a particular habit. The cues that can trigger a habit come in a wide range of forms: the feel of your phone in your pocket,
the smell of chocolate chip cookies, the sound of ambulance sirens. But the two most common cues are time and location. Implementation intentions leverage both of these cues.
The format is simple. I will behave at time in location. Hundreds of studies have shown that implementation intentions are effective for sticking to our goals, whether it's writing down the exact time and date of your flu shot or recording the time of your colonoscopy appointment. They increase the odds that people will stick with habits like recycling, studying, going to sleep early, and stopping smoking. The reason this works is that it eliminates the ambiguity. Many people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They say, I want to work out more, or I want to be more productive. But they never say when and where. They leave it up to chance. They hope that they will feel like it at some point during the day. When you use an implementation intention, you don't have to wait for inspiration to strike. You don't have to make a decision. When the moment of action occurs, there's no need to make a decision. Simply follow your predetermined plan. However, there is an even more powerful way to use this strategy. It is called habit stacking. To understand habit stacking, we must look at the French philosopher Denis Diderot. Diderot lived nearly his entire life in poverty, but that changed all at once in 1765. His daughter was about to be married, and he could not afford to pay for the wedding. Catherine the Great, the Empress of Russia, heard of Diderot's financial troubles and paid him a massive sum for his library. Suddenly, Diderot had money. To celebrate, he bought himself a beautiful scarlet robe. It was magnificent. In fact, it was too magnificent. Diderot noticed that his new robe was so beautiful that it made everything else in his house look terrible. He wrote that there was no more coordination, no more unity, no more beauty between his robe and the rest of his items. The robe was loud. The rest of his life was quiet. So he started buying things. He replaced his old rug with a new one from Damascus.
He decorated his home with beautiful sculptures. He bought a new mirror to place over the mantel. He bought a better kitchen table. One purchase led to the next. This tendency for one behavior to lead to another is known as the Diderot effect. You have experienced this. You buy a dress, and now you have to get new shoes and earrings to match. You buy a couch, and suddenly you're questioning the layout of your entire living room. We can use the Diderot effect to our advantage. No behavior happens in isolation. Each action becomes a cue that triggers the next behavior. This is the secret of habit stacking. Instead of pairing your new habit with a particular time and location, you pair it with a current habit. The formula for habit stacking is, after current habit, I will new habit. This was popularized by B.J. Fogg, a Stanford professor. For example, after I pour my cup of coffee each morning, I will meditate for 1 minute. After I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. After I sit down to dinner, I will say one thing I am grateful for that happened today. The beauty of habit stacking is that you already have existing patterns in your brain that are very strong. You probably brush your teeth every morning without thinking. You probably check your phone as soon as you wake up. By linking a new behavior to these established neural pathways, you are drafting off the momentum of the old habit. You can even create large stacks, chaining multiple habits together. After I pour my coffee, I will meditate for 60 seconds. After I meditate for 60 seconds, I will write my to-do list for the day. After I write my to-do list, I will immediately begin my first task. The key to successful habit stacking is selecting the right trigger. If you want to do a habit every day, but you stack it on top of a habit that only happens on Mondays, it won't work. You also need to be specific. Avoid vague triggers.
Do not say, when I take a break for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups. That is too ambiguous. When exactly? Before you eat? After you eat? Is it when you walk to the kitchen? Instead, say, when I close my laptop for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups next to my desk. Consistency relies on specificity. The more specific you are about the trigger, the less likely you are to miss it. So the first law of behavior change is to make it obvious. Strategies like implementation intentions and habit stacking are among the most practical ways to create obvious cues for your new habits. They take the decision-making out of the process and allow you to act on autopilot.
Chapter 6. Motivation is overrated.
Environment often matters more. Anne Thorndike is a primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. She had a crazy idea. She believed she could improve the eating habits of thousands of hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation in the slightest. She didn't plan on talking to them. She didn't plan on giving them a pamphlet about nutrition. She wasn't going to ask them to maintain a food diary. Instead, she decided to change the environment. Thorndike and her colleagues designed a 6-month study to alter the choice architecture of the hospital cafeteria. They started by changing how drinks were arranged in the room. Originally, the refrigerators next to the cash registers were filled with only soda. The researchers added water as an option to each one. Additionally, they placed baskets of bottled water next to the food stations throughout the room. Soda was still in the primary refrigerators, but water was now available at all drink locations. Over the next 3 months, the number of soda sales at the hospital dropped by 11.4%. Meanwhile, sales of bottled water increased by 25.8%. They made similar adjustments with food, placing healthier options at eye level and moving junk food to harder-to-reach places, and saw similar results. People didn't suddenly decide they wanted to be healthier. They didn't wake up with a surge of motivation. They simply grabbed what was easiest to see and reach. This study reveals a profound truth about human behavior. We like to think that we are in control of our choices. We like to think that we choose the soda because we really want the soda. But often we choose the soda simply because it is there. James Clear argues that environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Despite our unique personalities, we tend to react to the world around us in predictable ways.
If you walk into a church, you whisper. If you walk into a dark alley, you become vigilant. If you sit at a dinner table with a plate of cookies in the center, you will likely eat one, even if you weren't hungry. This leads to a powerful realization. Motivation is overrated. We tend to blame our failures on a lack of character. We say, I just don't have the discipline to stick to my diet. But the reality is that you are fighting a losing battle against your environment. If you sleep with your phone next to your bed, you will check it. If you keep beer in the front of the fridge, you will drink it. If you have a television in your bedroom, you will watch it. The human body has about 11 million sensory receptors. Approximately 10 million of those are dedicated to sight. Some experts estimate that half of the brain's resources are used on vision. We are visual creatures. If something is in our line of sight, it is far more likely to trigger a cue and a craving. This is why visual cues are the greatest catalyst of our behavior. For this reason, a small change in what you see can lead to a big shift in what you do. This brings us to the concept of environment design. You do not have to be the victim of your environment. You can be the architect of it. You can redesign your space to make the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible. Here is a practical example. Imagine you want to practice guitar more often. Most people keep their guitar in its case, tucked away in a closet or under the bed. To practice, you have to walk to the closet, open the door, pull out the case, unlatch it, and take the guitar out. That is a lot of friction. Using environment design, you would buy a guitar stand and place it in the middle of your living room. Now the cue is obvious. Every time you walk through the room, you see the guitar. It's staring at you. The path of least resistance has changed.
If you want to drink more water, fill up a few water bottles each morning and place them in common locations around your house. Put one on your desk. Put one in the living room. Put one on your nightstand. Now you don't have to make a decision to drink water. The cue is always present. If you want to take your medication, put the pill bottle right next to the faucet in the bathroom, so you see it every time you brush your teeth. The goal is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. But environment is not just about physical objects. It is also about the relationship you have with a space. In 1976, during the Vietnam War, the United States government was terrified. They discovered that over 15% of U.S. soldiers stationed in Vietnam were heroin addicts. The public was in a panic. They expected these soldiers to come home and unleash a wave of drug addiction and crime on American streets. But that didn't happen. When the soldiers returned home, researchers found that only 5% of them became re-addicted within a year, and just 12% relapsed within 3 years. In other words, approximately 9 out of 10 soldiers who were addicted to heroin in Vietnam eliminated their addiction virtually overnight. This contradicted everything we thought we knew about addiction. Heroin is supposed to be one of the hardest drugs to quit. But researchers realized that the addiction was tied to the context. In Vietnam, the soldiers were surrounded by cues triggering their heroin use: the stress of war, the jungle environment, the easy access to the drug.
the camaraderie of fellow users. When they came home, the environment changed completely. No jungle, no stress of combat, no fellow users. The context vanished, and so did the habit. Compare this to a typical drug addict. They go to a rehab clinic, get clean, and then return to their old neighborhood.
They return to the same apartment, the same friends, and the same visual cues that triggered their addiction in the first place. It is no wonder the relapse rate is so high. The lesson here is context is the cue. Many of us live in spaces where the contexts are mixed. You might eat dinner on the couch while watching television. You might answer emails while lying in bed. When you do this, the cues get crossed. Your brain doesn't know if the bed is for sleeping or for working. It doesn't know if the couch is for eating or for relaxing. If you are struggling with insomnia, one of the best things you can do is to make your bedroom a single-use zone. No TV, no laptop, no phone. The bed is for sleep and intimacy only. If you do this, your brain will eventually associate that room solely with sleep, and you will find yourself getting tired as soon as you walk in. If you work from home, try to have a dedicated space for work. It doesn't have to be a whole office. It can be a specific chair at the kitchen table. When you sit in that chair, you are working. When you stand up, you are done. When you mix contexts, you mix habits, and usually the easier habit wins. If you try to work while watching TV, you will end up watching TV. So stop relying on willpower. Stop trying to force yourself to focus in a room filled with distractions. Be the architect. If you want to make a habit a big part of your life, make the cue a big part of your environment.
Chapter 7. The Secret to Self-Control. In 1971, as the Vietnam War was heading into its 16th year, Congressman Robert Steele from Connecticut and Morgan Murphy from Illinois made a discovery that stunned the American public. While visiting the troops, they found that over 15% of U.S. soldiers stationed there were heroin addicts. We touched on this story in the previous chapter regarding environment, but now we must look at it through the lens of self-control. When the soldiers returned, the vast majority stopped using. This finding completely upended the accepted definition of addiction. At the time, addiction was considered a permanent moral failing or a permanent biological defect. The logic was that once you were an addict, you were always an addict. But the data showed something else. It showed that discipline is often a product of circumstance. When we look at people who seem to have incredible self-control, the people who always eat clean, who always go to the gym, who never procrastinate, we assume they are fundamentally different from us. We assume they have a superhuman reserve of willpower. We assume they are just stronger. But recent research has shown that this is a myth. When scientists analyze people who appear to have tremendous self-control, it turns out those individuals are not all that different from those who are struggling. They do not have a larger battery of willpower. So what are they doing differently? They are structuring their lives so that they do not require willpower and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. The people with the best self-control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. It is easy to practice self-restraint when you don't have to use it very often. The disciplined person is not the one who stares at the cookie and says no. The disciplined person is the one who doesn't buy the cookie in the first place. This brings us to the inversion of the first law.
If the first law is make it obvious, the inversion is make it invisible. James Clear argues that relying on self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. You can resist a temptation once, you can resist it twice, but if you are constantly fighting against the cues in your environment, eventually your resolve will break. Willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired. If you flex it all day, you will have no strength left by the evening. This is why you eat the junk food at 8 p.m. It isn't because you are a weak person. It is because you have spent the entire day making decisions and resisting urges, and your battery is empty. Furthermore, once a habit is encoded in your brain, the urge to act follows whenever the relevant environmental cues reappear. This is known as cue-induced wanting. You might not have thought about smoking for 10 years, but if you walk into a bar where you used to smoke with an old friend and you smell the smoke and you hold a drink in your hand, the cue is triggered. The urge returns. The brain remembers. You cannot simply unlearn a habit. The neural pathways are carved deep into your mind. If the cue is present, the habit will fight to survive. Therefore, the most practical way to eliminate a bad habit
is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. If you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you are continually feeling like you are not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger jealousy and envy. If you are wasting too much time watching television, move the TV out of the bedroom. If you are spending too much money on electronics, unsubscribe from the tech review emails. This sounds too simple to be the secret to self-control. We want the secret to be a mental technique or a mantra, but the secret is removal. Clear uses the example of a man who wanted to stop watching so much TV. He didn't promise himself he would watch less. He didn't set a timer.
Instead, he unplugged the television and put it in the closet. Now, if he wanted to watch a show, he had to go to the closet, drag the TV out, and plug it in. That was enough friction to stop the mindless viewing. Then he took it a step further. He unplugged the TV and took the batteries out of the remote. Now it took him an extra 10 seconds to start watching. And if he really wanted to be extreme, he could have moved the TV into a different room entirely after every use. The point is to create a gap between the impulse and the action. Make the cues of your bad habits invisible. If you are trying to write a book, do not sit at a desk with your phone face up, your email tab open, and a stack of bills to pay next to your laptop. That is a recipe for failure. You are asking your willpower to do heavy lifting that your environment should be doing for you. Go to a library, leave your phone in the car, sit at a table with nothing on it but your notebook. Suddenly, self-control becomes easy because there is nothing to control. Self-control is a limited resource. Do not spend it on things that could be solved by simply moving a few objects around. Be the architect of your world, not the victim of it. Remove the cues, and you remove the habit. The second law, make it attractive.
Chapter 8. How to Make a Habit Irresistible. In the 1940s, a Dutch scientist named Nico Tinbergen performed a series of experiments that transformed our understanding of what motivates us. Tinbergen was an ethologist, a researcher who studies animal behavior in natural environments, and he was particularly interested in the herring gull. Adult herring gulls have a small red dot on their beak. Tinbergen noticed that newly hatched chicks would peck at this spot whenever they wanted food. It was an instinctual cue. To test this instinct, Tinbergen created a collection of fake beaks made of cardboard. He wanted to see if the chicks would peck at them. The results were shocking. When he presented a fake cardboard beak with a red dot, the chicks pecked away just as if it were their mother. They didn't care that it was clearly fake. They just saw the red dot. Then Tinbergen made the dot larger. The chicks pecked even more aggressively. Finally, he created a beak that was painted with 3 bright red bands. It looked nothing like a real bird. It was a super stimulus. When he placed it over the nest, the baby birds went crazy. They pecked at the red bands with frantic delight. They preferred the fake super stimulus to the real thing. Tinbergen found similar behavior in other animals. The gray-lag goose, for instance, has an instinct to roll any round object back into its nest if it rolls away. Usually, this is an egg. But Tinbergen found that the goose would roll a billiard ball back into the nest. If he gave the goose a volleyball, she would try to roll that too. The bigger the round object, the harder she tried to retrieve it. This is the concept of a supernormal stimulus. It is a heightened version of reality that elicits a stronger response than usual. James Clear argues that modern humans are also prone to falling for supernormal stimuli. If you think about it, junk food is a supernormal stimulus. In nature, food is rarely sweet, salty, and fatty all at the same time.
You might find fruit sweet or meat fatty, but you won't find a Dorito. Food scientists spend millions of dollars designing products to be irresistible. They calculate the perfect bliss point, the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that excites your brain and keeps you coming back for more. When you eat a potato chip, your brain lights up like a pinball machine. It is the red dot on the beak multiplied by 1,000. Social media is a supernormal stimulus for connection. In the real world, you might get a few compliments a week. On Instagram, you can get hundreds of likes in a minute. Pornography is a supernormal stimulus for sex. Video games are a supernormal stimulus for achievement and conquest. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habit-forming. This brings us to the biological signature of every habit: dopamine. We used to think that dopamine was just about pleasure, but scientists now know that dopamine is about desire. It is about craving. When you gamble and win, your dopamine spikes. But, and this is the crucial part, your dopamine also spikes before you place the bet. It spikes when you anticipate the reward. This anticipation is what drives us to act. The brain has far more neural circuitry allocated for wanting rewards than for liking them. The wanting center is massive. This makes sense evolutionarily. If you didn't want to hunt or reproduce, you would die. Liking the food was secondary. Wanting it was essential for survival. This insight that desire drives behavior leads us to the second law of behavior change. Make it attractive. If we want to build a good habit, we need to make it trigger a dopamine spike. We need to make it irresistible. One of the best ways to do this is a strategy called temptation bundling. Temptation bundling works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do. The term was coined by Katie Milkman, a professor at the Wharton School.
She studied a graduate student who loved reading The Hunger Games but needed to lose weight. He created a rule for himself. He would only allow himself to read The Hunger Games while he was exercising at the gym. He bundled the temptation, reading the novel, with the necessary habit, exercise. The craving for the book pulled him into the gym. This is an application of Premack's principle, which states that more probable behaviors will reinforce less probable behaviors. You can construct your own temptation bundles easily. I will only listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I am folding laundry. I will only get a pedicure while I am processing my overdue work emails. I will only watch Netflix while I am riding the stationary bike. You are using the supernormal stimulus, the podcast, the show, the treat, to drive the productive behavior. You are hacking your own dopamine system. By doing this, you transform a chore into an opportunity. You stop dreading the treadmill and start looking forward to the next chapter of your audiobook. You stop dreading the laundry and start looking forward to the podcast. The goal is to create a craving where there wasn't one before. If you can make the habit attractive, you are halfway to making it automatic.
Chapter 9. The Role of Family and Friends in Shaping Your Habits. In 1965, a Hungarian man named Laszlo Polgar wrote a series of strange letters to a woman named Clara. Laszlo was a firm believer in hard work. In fact, he believed completely in the idea that geniuses are made, not born. He wanted to prove this theory to the world in the most radical way possible, by raising his own future children to be prodigies. He proposed a pedagogical experiment. He told Clara that if they married, he wanted to raise their children in a highly specific, controlled environment dedicated to mastering a single subject. Clara was a teacher. She was intrigued. She agreed. They married, and eventually they had 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith. The subject Laszlo chose for them was chess. The Polgar home was a shrine to the game. It was filled with chess books. The walls were covered with pictures of famous chess players. The children began playing at a very young age. They practiced for hours every day. They were homeschooled so their time wouldn't be wasted on subjects that didn't contribute to their chess mastery. To an outsider, this might sound like a prison. It sounds like a grueling, joyless childhood forced upon them by an obsessive father. But if you ask the Polgar sisters, they tell a different story. They loved it. They didn't view chess as a chore, they viewed it as their culture. It was the air they breathed. Everyone they knew played chess. Everyone they respected played chess. For Susan, Sophia, and Judith, playing chess for 6 hours a day was as natural as a normal child watching cartoons. The results were historic. Susan became a grandmaster at age 21. Sophia became an international master. And the youngest, Judith, became the greatest female chess player of all time. At age 15, she became the youngest grandmaster in history, beating the record previously held by Bobby Fischer.
The story of the Polgar sisters reveals a deep truth about the second law: make it attractive. Behaviors are attractive when they help us fit in. We're not just biological creatures, we're social creatures. For most of human history, living in a tribe was essential for survival. If you were cast out, you died. The lone wolf does not survive. As a result, the human brain evolved a deep, overpowering desire to belong. We want to bond with others. We want to earn the respect and approval of our peers. Because of this, we don't choose our earliest habits. We imitate them. We follow the script handed down by our friends and family, our church or school, our local community, and society at large. Each of these cultures and groups comes with a set of expectations and standards.
a set of social norms. You may not realize it, but you are constantly looking to others to determine how to act. We imitate the habits of three groups in particular: the close, the many, the powerful. First, the close. These are your family and friends. Proximity has a powerful effect on our behavior. We pick up the habits of the people around us. If your best friend smokes, you are more likely to smoke. If your spouse is a heavy drinker, you are more likely to drink. If your office mate eats donuts every morning, you will likely grab one too. There is a famous rule that says you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This offers a powerful strategy for building better habits. Join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. If you want to get into shape, surround yourself with people who exercise. For them, going to the gym isn't a heroic act of willpower, it's just what they do on Tuesday. When you are in a tribe where the desired behavior is the normal behavior, the friction disappears. You don't have to force yourself to act, you just have to act like everyone else. But there is a caveat. It works best if you already have something in common with the group. If you are a computer nerd who wants to get fit, don't just join a gym filled with bodybuilders. Join a group like Nerd Fitness, a community of people who love video games and Star Wars, but also want to do push-ups. When you share a mutual identity, we are nerds, the new habit, we exercise, becomes easier to adopt. Second, the many. This is the influence of the tribe, the herd mentality. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments that are now legendary. He brought a subject into a room with a group of strangers. They were shown 2 cards. One card had a single line on it. The other card had 3 lines of varying lengths. The group was asked to identify which of the 3 lines matched the length of the single line. It was an easy visual task. The answer was obvious. But there was a catch. The strangers in the room were actually actors hired by the researchers, and they were instructed to confidently pick the wrong answer. When it was the subject's turn, he would look at the lines. He knew the answer was A, but everyone else had said B. He would start to doubt his eyes. He would sweat. He would look around nervously. And incredibly often, he would say B. In fact, nearly 75% of subjects agreed with the group's incorrect answer at least once. This is the pressure of the many. The reward of being accepted is often greater than the reward of being right. The human mind knows that if it challenges the tribe, it risks expulsion. So we conform. When changing your habits means challenging the tribe, change is unattractive. When changing your habits means fitting in with the tribe, change is attractive. Third, the powerful. We imitate those who have status and prestige. We are drawn to behaviors that earn us respect, approval, admiration, and status. We look at the successful people in our field and we copy them. We wear the same clothes.
We use the same vocabulary. We adopt the same routines. We do this because we want what they have. Conversely, we avoid behaviors that lower our status. We trim our hedges because we don't want to be the lazy neighbor. We recycle because we don't want to be seen as wasteful. We hide our bad habits because we fear judgment. So how do we use this? If you want to build a habit, make it a signal of status. Align it with the approval of a group you admire. Ultimately, your environment is not just a physical space, it is a social space. If you are trying to quit smoking, but all your friends go out for a smoke break every hour, you are fighting a losing battle against the need to belong. To make good habits attractive, you must find a tribe where the behavior you want is the behavior they already have. Nothing sustains motivation better than belonging to the tribe. It transforms a personal quest into a shared mission.
Chapter 10. How to find and fix the causes of your bad habits. At the end of 2012, a man sat on his balcony in Istanbul, Turkey, and lit a cigarette. He had been a smoker for years, but this time something was different. He wasn't just smoking. He was reading a book called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr. Carr's book is fascinating because it defies the standard advice on quitting. It doesn't employ scare tactics. It doesn't show you pictures of blackened lungs. It doesn't tell you that you are going to die of cancer. It doesn't tell you how expensive the habit is. Alan Carr knew that smokers already know all of that. No smoker smokes because they think it is healthy. Instead, Carr attacks the underlying beliefs, the psychological causes of the habit.
He systematically reframes the cues. He asks, "Why do you smoke?" You say, "To relieve stress." Carr explains, "Smoking doesn't relieve stress. It creates the withdrawal symptoms that mimic stress. The relief you feel is just the temporary satisfying of the withdrawal caused by the previous cigarette. You are not relieving stress, you are feeding a monster." You say, "It helps me socialize." Carr explains, "You are actually leaving the social gathering to go stand outside alone." By the end of the book, the smoker has no logical reasons left to smoke. The cue, "I feel stressed," no longer triggers the prediction, "A cigarette will fix this." The association is broken. This brings us to the inversion of the second law: make it unattractive. To understand how to make a bad habit unattractive, we must understand where cravings come from. We often talk about cravings as if they are for specific things. You say, "I am craving a pizza. I am craving a cigarette. I am craving a check of Instagram." But James Clear argues that you do not actually crave the object itself. You crave the change in internal state that the object provides. At a deep evolutionary level, your brain doesn't know what a cigarette is.
It doesn't know what Instagram is. These are modern inventions. But your brain does have ancient underlying motives that have guided human behavior for hundreds of thousands of years. Here are some of these underlying motives: conserve energy, obtain food and water, find love and reproduce, connect and bond with others, win social acceptance and approval, reduce uncertainty, achieve status and prestige. Every modern habit is just a new solution to an old problem. Posting on Instagram is a modern way to win social acceptance. Browsing Tinder is a modern way to find love and reproduce. Google searching is a modern way to reduce uncertainty. Playing video games is a modern way to achieve status and prestige. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly taking in information from the environment and guessing what will happen next. When you notice a cue, your brain runs a simulation. You see the stove, you predict, "If I touch that, it will burn," so you don't touch it. You see the notification on your phone, you predict, "If I click that, I will feel connected," so you click it. The craving is the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. The cause of your habits is actually the prediction that precedes them. These predictions lead to feelings, which is how we typically describe a craving: a feeling, a desire, an urge. This is important because it means that your habits are not driven by reality. They are driven by your interpretation of reality. Two people can look at a cigarette. One person sees a way to relax, positive prediction. The other person sees a disgusting, smelly stick, negative prediction. The cue is the same, but the prediction is different. Therefore, the habit is different. To break a bad habit, you must rewrite the prediction. You must make the habit unattractive. You have to genuinely change the way you think about the behavior. We can do this through a strategy called reframing.
Reframing is the art of highlighting the benefits of avoiding a bad habit rather than the costs of doing it. If you are trying to save money, it is easy to frame it as a sacrifice. "I can't buy that coffee. I can't go to that restaurant." This makes saving money unattractive. Reframe it: "I am buying future freedom. I am buying a month of rent next year. I am increasing my financial independence." Suddenly, saving feels empowering. If you are trying to exercise, do not view it as a chore that drains your energy. Reframe it: "I am building strength. I am teaching my body to be faster. I am investing in my longevity." One simple word shift can help with this. We often say, "I have to do this. I have to wake up early. I have to make breakfast. I have to go to work." Change one word: "I get to do this. I get to wake up early. I get to make breakfast. I get to go to work." By changing have to get, you shift from viewing these behaviors as burdens to viewing them as opportunities. You remind yourself that these are privileges. You are alive. You have a job. You have food to cook. This is not just positive thinking. It is neurohacking. You are changing the prediction your brain makes. Clear offers a final advanced tactic for reprogramming your brain: motivation rituals. If you can associate a neutral cue with a positive emotional state, you can trigger that state on command. Think of a writer who puts on headphones every time he writes. At first, the headphones are just plastic and wire, but if he wears them every time he enters a state of deep focus, his brain begins to link the two. Headphones on, deep focus.
Eventually, the headphones become a cue. He can put them on, and his brain instantly shifts into writing mode, even if he wasn't feeling motivated a moment before. Athletes use this all the time. They have a pre-game routine. They do the same stretches, listen to the same playlist, tie their shoes in the same order.
This ritual tells the body it is time to perform. You can create your own motivation ritual. Find a habit that makes you feel happy or relaxed, perhaps petting your dog, or taking 3 deep breaths, or listening to a specific song. Do this action every time you are about to do something difficult. Eventually, the action itself will trigger the focus you need. The key to the second law, make it attractive, is to realize that your cravings are malleable. You are not a slave to your biology. By understanding the underlying motives and reframing your predictions, you can make hard habits attractive and bad habits repulsive.
The third law, make it easy. Chapter 11, walk slowly but never backward. On the first day of class, Jerry Yulesman, a professor at the University of Florida, divided his film photography students into 2 groups. Everyone on the left side of the classroom, he explained, would be in the quantity group. They would be graded solely on the amount of work they produced. On the final day of class, he would tally the number of photos submitted by each student. 100 photos would rate an A, 90 photos a B, 80 photos a C, and so on. Everyone on the right side of the room would be in the quality group. They would be graded only on the excellence of their work. They would only need to produce 1 photo during the semester, but to get an A, it had to be a nearly perfect image. At the end of the term, he was surprised by the results. The best photos were all produced by the quantity group. During the semester, these students were busy taking photos, experimenting with composition and lighting, testing various methods in the darkroom, and learning from their mistakes. In the process of creating hundreds of photos, they honed their skills. Meanwhile, the quality group sat around speculating about perfection. In the end, they had little to show for their efforts other than unverified theories and 1 mediocre photo. This parable perfectly illustrates the difference between being in motion and taking action. There is a common mistake that is often made when it comes to habit formation. We get so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking action. We research the best diet plan, we read books on the best workout routine, we debate the best software for writing. James Clear calls this being in motion. Motion is planning, strategizing, and learning. Those are all good things, but they do not produce a result. Action, on the other hand, is the type of behavior that will deliver an outcome.
If I outline 20 ideas for articles I want to write, that is motion. If I actually write and publish an article, that is action. If I search for a better diet plan and read a few books on the topic, that is motion. If I actually eat a healthy meal, that is action. If I go to the gym and ask about a personal trainer, that is motion. If I step under the bar and squat, that is action. Sometimes motion is useful, but it will never produce an outcome by itself. It doesn't matter how many times you talk to the personal trainer, that motion will never get you in shape. Only the action of working out will get the result you're looking to achieve. If motion doesn't lead to results, why do we do it? We do it because it allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. Most of us are experts at avoiding criticism. We don't want to be judged or to fail, so we gravitate toward motion. It feels like work. It feels like we are doing something, but really we are just preparing to do something. When preparation becomes a form of procrastination, you need to change something. You don't want to merely be planning, you want to be practicing. This brings us to the core mechanism of the third law, repetition. If you want to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. You don't need to map out every feature of a new habit, you just need to practice it. This is the first takeaway of the third law. You just need to get your reps in. This is grounded in neuroplasticity. Every time you repeat an action, you are activating a specific neural circuit associated with that habit. This is known as Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. If you struggle to learn a new language, it is because the neural pathways are weak. But as you practice, as you repeat the vocabulary and the grammar, the connections strengthen.
The insulation around the neural fibers, called myelin, begins to thicken, which allows the signals to travel faster and more efficiently. This process is called long-term potentiation. It means the more you do something, the easier it becomes. Eventually, you reach a point of automaticity. This is the ability to perform a behavior without thinking about each step, which occurs when the non-conscious mind takes over. When you look at the graph of habit formation, it is not a straight line, it is a curve. In the beginning, it takes a lot of effort, but as repetitions increase, the automaticity increases until it levels off and the habit becomes second nature. People often ask, how long does it take to build a new habit? They want a number. They want to hear 21 days or 66 days. But Clear argues that this is the wrong question. The question is not how long, the question is how many. It doesn't matter if 21 days have passed if you haven't done the behavior. Habits are not built on time, they are built on frequency. You could do something twice in a month, or you could do it 100 times. The frequency makes the difference. Your current habits have been internalized over the course of hundreds, if not thousands of repetitions. New habits require the same level of frequency. So, to make a habit easy, you don't need to worry about time. You just need to put in the reps. And to put in the reps, you need to make the habit as easy as possible to start. Chapter 12, The Law of Least Effort. In his award-winning book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, anthropologist and biologist Jared Diamond addresses a simple but profound question. Why did some civilizations conquer others? Why did the Europeans colonize the Americas, rather than the Native Americans colonizing Europe? Diamond's answer lies not in biology or intelligence, but in geography. He points out that the shape of the continents mattered immensely. The major axis of the Americas runs from north to south.
That means as you travel down the continent, the climate changes drastically. You go from the Arctic North to the temperate center, to the tropical jungle, to the temperate south. This made it incredibly difficult for agriculture to spread. If you domesticated a crop in a temperate climate, you couldn't easily transport it to a tropical climate. The farming techniques didn't travel. Europe and Asia, however, are oriented east to west. You can travel from France to China and stay in roughly the same latitude the entire time. The climate is similar, the day length is similar. This meant that once a crop was domesticated or an animal tamed in one place, the technology could spread rapidly across the entire continent. The result was that agriculture spread 2 to 3 times faster across Asia and Europe than it did up and down the Americas. Faster agriculture meant faster population growth, which meant more soldiers, more inventors, and more immunity to diseases. The Europeans didn't try harder, they just had the path of least resistance. James Clear uses this historical example to illustrate a fundamental law of human behavior, the law of least effort. We are biologically wired to conserve energy. For our ancestors, energy was a precious resource. You didn't waste calories running for fun, you ran to catch food or escape a predator. Every calorie burned was a calorie that had to be replaced. As a result, our brains are programmed to follow the path of least resistance. When deciding between two similar options, people will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. We like to tell ourselves that we will do the hard thing. We say, I will force myself to go to the gym. I will force myself to write that report. But in the long run, we are lazy, and that is okay. It is smart, it is efficient. The problem arises when the path of least resistance leads to a bad habit. Scroll through Instagram? Easy. 0 calories burned. High dopamine.
Do 50 burpees? Hard. Many calories burned. Delayed reward. The brain naturally chooses the scroll. To build better habits, we must stop fighting against this law and start working with it. We need to reduce the friction associated with our good habits and increase the friction associated with our bad habits. Friction is the enemy of action. The more friction there is between you and a behavior, the less likely you are to do it. Consider the gym. If your gym is 20 minutes away from your house, the friction is high. You have to drive there and drive back. That is 40 minutes of wasted time just to get to the workout. You will likely find an excuse to skip it. But if your gym is on your commute home from work, the friction is lower. You are already driving past it. And if your gym is in your garage, the friction is almost zero. The goal is to reduce the friction to the absolute minimum. Clear introduces the concept of priming the environment. This means organizing your space not for how it looks, but for how it functions. If you want to draw more, put your sketch pad and pencils on top of your desk, open and ready to go. If you want to exercise, lay out your workout clothes, shoes, and water bottle the night before.
If you want to eat healthier, chop up the vegetables on Sunday and put them in clear containers at eye level in the fridge. You are removing the steps between you and the good behavior. Conversely, you can use high friction to stop bad behaviors. If you waste too much time on your phone, leave it in another room. If you check social media too often, delete the apps from your phone so you have to log in through the browser every time. If you spend too much money, put your credit card in a specialized container, fill it with water, and freeze it in a block of ice. You literally have to wait for the ice to melt to spend money.
Clear shares a personal habit he calls resetting the room. Every time he finishes an activity, he resets the environment to be ready for the next use. When he finishes watching TV, he puts the remote back on the TV stand, folds the blanket, and fluffs the pillows. When he finishes eating, he immediately washes the dishes and wipes the counter. When he finishes working, he clears his desk. He does this not just because he likes a clean house, but because he wants to make the next action easy. Resetting the room is a way of being kind to your future self. When you walk into the living room the next day, you don't have to clean up the mess from last night before you can relax. You can just relax. When you walk to your desk in the morning, you don't have to shuffle papers to find your pen. You can just write. The central idea is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. Much of the battle of building better habits comes down to finding ways to reduce the friction associated with our good habits and increase the friction associated with our bad ones. Make the good habit the path of least resistance. Chapter 13. How to stop procrastinating by using the 2-minute rule. Twyla Tharp is widely regarded as one of the greatest dancers and choreographers of the modern era. In her best-selling book, The Creative Habit, she reveals a daily ritual that she believes is the secret to her success. Every morning, she wakes up at 5:30 a.m. She puts on her workout clothes, her leg warmers, her sweatshirt, and her hat. She walks outside her Manhattan home, hails a taxi, and tells the driver to take her to the Pumping Iron Gym at 91st Street and 1st Avenue. She goes into the gym and works out for 2 hours. But here is the fascinating part. Tharp says that her habit is not the workout. Her habit is the cab. She explains that the moment she tells the driver where to go, she has completed the ritual.
It is a simple act, but doing it the same way each morning habituates it, makes it repeatable, easy to do. It reduces the chance that she would skip it or do it differently. It is one more item in her arsenal of routines, and one less thing to think about. This sounds too simple. How can a cab ride be the habit, rather than the 2 hours of sweating and lifting? Tharp understands a fundamental principle of behavioral psychology. The entry point matters more than the end point. We often think about habits in terms of the final outcome. We say, I want to run a marathon. I want to write a novel. I want to get 6-pack abs. But when you dream about the result, you often overlook the process. You set a goal that is too big. You say, I will run 3 miles today. Then you look outside, see it is raining, feel that you are tired, and realize that running 3 miles sounds like a lot of work. The friction is too high. To overcome this, James Clear introduces the 2-minute rule. The rule states, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You will find that nearly any habit can be scaled down into a 2-minute version. Read before bed each night becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Study for class becomes open my notes. Fold the laundry becomes fold 1 pair of socks. Run 3 miles becomes tie my running shoes. The idea is to make your habits as easy as possible to start. Anyone can meditate for 1 minute. Anyone can read 1 page. And as we discussed earlier, a powerful strategy is to create a gateway habit that naturally leads you down a more productive path. You are not trying to do the whole thing. You are just trying to master the art of showing up. A lot of people resist this. They say, but I know the real goal is to run the marathon. I'm not stupid.
I know that putting on my shoes isn't enough. But if you can't learn the basic skill of showing up, you have little hope of mastering the finer details. You have to standardize before you can optimize. You can't improve a habit that doesn't exist. The goal is to master the first 2 minutes. Once you start doing the right thing, it is much easier to continue doing it. A habit must be established first before it can be improved. Clear shares the story of a reader who used this rule to lose over 100 pounds. For the first 6 weeks, he went to the gym, but he had a strict rule. He was not allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. He would drive to the gym, walk in, do half an exercise, and then leave. To most people, this sounds ridiculous. You're wasting gas, you're barely sweating. What is the point? But for this man, the point wasn't a workout. The point was becoming the type of person who goes to the gym. He was casting a vote for his identity. He was mastering the art of showing up. After 6 weeks, he said to himself, "Well, I always come here anyway. I might as well stay a little longer." He had built the foundation. He had removed the fear and the friction. Strategies like this work for another reason. They reinforce the identity you want to build. If you show up at the gym 5 days in a row, even if it is just for 2 minutes, you are voting for your new identity. You are not worried about getting in shape. You are focused on becoming the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. We can think of this as habit shaping. You start with the 2-minute version, and then you slowly scale it up. Phase 1, put on running shoes, the 2-minute rule. Phase 2, walk out the door. Phase 3, walk around the block. Phase 4, run for 5 minutes. Phase 5, run for 5 miles. If you try to jump straight to Phase 5, you will likely fail. But if you master Phase 1, the rest will often follow. The 2-minute rule is also a powerful way to stop procrastination.
Think about the tasks you are dreading right now. Maybe you have a report to write. The thought of writing the whole report is overwhelming. But can you write one sentence? Often, once you start, you will find that the anxiety disappears. The hardest part is crossing the threshold of the start. Newton's first law of motion applies to psychology as well as physics. An object in motion stays in motion. Once you take that first step, once you open the book, once you put on the shoes, once you write the sentence, momentum takes over. The rule is a trick, yes, but it is a trick that works because it acknowledges the reality of human nature. We are intimidated by big mountains. We are not intimidated by small stones. Start with the stone. Master the entry point. Make it so easy you can't say no. Chapter 14. How to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. In the summer of 1830, the French author Victor Hugo was facing an impossible deadline. 12 months earlier, he had promised his publisher a new book. But instead of writing, Hugo had spent the year pursuing other projects, entertaining guests, and delaying his work. Frustrated, the publisher set a new, terrifying deadline. The book had to be finished by February 1831, less than 6 months away. Hugo knew his own nature. He knew that if he had the option to go out and socialize, he would take it. He needed a way to force himself to write. He needed to make his bad habits impossible. So he concocted a strange plan. He collected all of his clothes, his suits, his coats, his formal wear, and locked them away in a large chest. He gave the key to his assistant with strict instructions not to return it until the manuscript was complete. He was left with nothing to wear but a large gray knitted shawl. Without suitable clothing, he couldn't go outdoors. He couldn't entertain guests. He was physically trapped in his study. He had no choice but to write. The strategy worked.
Hugo wrote furiously during the fall and winter of 1830. The Hunchback of Notre Dame was published on January 14, 1831, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Victor Hugo employed what psychologists call a commitment device. A commitment device is a choice you make in the present that controls your actions in the future. It is a way to lock in future behavior, bind you to good habits, and restrict you from bad ones. This is the ultimate application of the third law of behavior change. If the goal of the third law is to make good habits easy, the goal of the inversion is to make bad habits difficult. Ideally, you want to make your bad habits impossible. We often think that we need more willpower to resist temptation, but commitment devices allow us to bypass willpower entirely. By changing the environment or the conditions of the future, we ensure that we don't have to fight the battle at all. This concept is sometimes called a Ulysses Pact, named after the Greek hero. Ulysses knew that when he sailed past the sirens, their beautiful songs would enchant him and cause him to steer his ship into the rocks. He wanted to hear the music, but he didn't want to die. So he ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax so they couldn't hear a thing. Then he had them tie him tightly to the mast of the ship. He instructed them not to untie him, no matter how much he screamed or begged. When the ship sailed past the island, Ulysses heard the song. He went mad with desire. He screamed at his men to untie him. He struggled against the ropes. But the men, unable to hear him and following his previous orders, kept rowing. They survived. Ulysses survived not because he was stronger than the sirens, but because he had negotiated his weakness in advance.
There are many ways to create a Ulysses pact in modern life. If you were trying to lose weight, purchase food in small, individual packages rather than bulk sizes. If you are addicted to social media, delete the apps from your phone. If you want to stop spending money, set up an automatic transfer to your savings account the moment you get paid, so the money is gone before you see it. One of the most effective ways to lock in behavior is through the use of technology. We live in an age where we can outsource our willpower to machines. Automation is the ultimate commitment device. Consider the act of saving for retirement. In the past, you had to physically go to the bank and deposit money. It required a decision every month. Now, you can set up an automatic deduction from your paycheck. You make the decision once, and the machine executes it forever. You become wealthy not because of monthly willpower, but because of a one-time setup. James Clear calls these one-time actions that pay off forever. Most habits require repeated effort. You have to choose to go to the gym every day. But one-time actions require a single instance of effort that automates your habits for years. Here are some examples of one-time actions that lock in good habits. Sleep. Buy a high-quality mattress. Get blackout curtains. Remove the TV from the bedroom. Nutrition. Buy smaller plates to reduce portion sizes automatically. Buy a water filter to make water taste better. Clear the junk food out of the pantry. Productivity. Turn off notifications on your phone. Unsubscribe from marketing emails. Delete games from your computer. Finance. Set up automatic bill pay. Cancel cable. These actions are powerful because they change the default setting of your life. The average person spends their life fighting the current. They try to save money while their bank account is easily accessible. They try to eat healthy while their house is full of cookies. They try to focus while their phone is buzzing.
The person who uses commitment devices and one-time actions is swimming downstream. They have designed a life where the current carries them toward their goals. There's a story about the inventor John Henry Patterson. In the 1800s, he bought a small coal mining store. He noticed that his employees were stealing from him. It wasn't because they were evil people, it was because the cash was kept in an open drawer, and it was easy to skim a few dollars without anyone noticing. The environment invited theft. Patterson didn't try to lecture them on morality. He didn't try to hire better people. He bought a new invention called Ritty's Incorruptible Cashier, the first cash register. The machine automatically locked the cash drawer after every transaction and recorded the sale. Instantly, theft became impossible. His store went from losing money to making a profit overnight. Patterson didn't change the people. He changed the mechanism. He made the bad habit impossible. The lesson of the third law is to make the road to your goals as smooth as possible. But sometimes the best way to do that is to put up a barricade on the road to failure. When you can't rely on your future self to do the right thing, rely on a system that forces you to. The fourth law, make it satisfying. Chapter 15, the cardinal rule of behavior change. In the late 1990s, a public health worker named Stephen Luby traveled to Karachi, Pakistan. He was there to solve a massive problem. In the squatter settlements of Karachi, the sanitation conditions were horrific. There was no sewage system, waste ran through the streets, the water supply was contaminated. As a result, disease was rampant. Diarrhea and pneumonia were killing thousands of children every year. Luby knew that the solution was simple: soap. If he could get people to wash their hands, he could cut the disease rates in half. But knowing the solution and getting people to use it are two different things.
People in Karachi knew that hand washing was important. They had heard the lectures, but they didn't do it. The habit hadn't stuck. Luby partnered with Procter & Gamble to try a different approach. They didn't just give out soap. They introduced a premium soap, Safeguard soap. It smelled good. It foamed easily. It felt luxurious on the skin. Suddenly, hand washing wasn't a chore. It was a pleasant experience. One woman told Luby, "I love this soap. I want my hands to smell like this." The result was immediate. Hand washing rates skyrocketed. The health of the community transformed. Diarrhea dropped by 52%, pneumonia by 48%. Long after the study ended and Luby left, the habit remained. The people kept buying the soap because they liked using it. This story illustrates the fourth law of behavior change: make it satisfying. We are more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience is satisfying. This sounds obvious, but there is a nuance here that is critical to understand. The human brain is not wired to care about the future. It is wired to care about the now.
For thousands of years, humans lived in an immediate return environment. If you were hungry, you hunted and ate. If a storm was coming, you found shelter. The actions you took had immediate consequences. Today, we live in a delayed return environment. You go to work today, but you don't get paid for 2 weeks. You go to the gym today, but you don't lose weight until next month. You save money now, but you don't retire for decades. The problem is that our brains are still running the old software. We value the present far more than the future. This is a cognitive bias known as hyperbolic discounting, or time inconsistency. This leads to the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. The reason you have bad habits is that the immediate outcome is usually good. Smoking, immediate stress relief.
Long-term, cancer. Overeating, immediate pleasure. Long-term, obesity. Procrastinating, immediate relief from work. Long-term, stress. With bad habits, the immediate outcome is positive, but the ultimate outcome is negative. With good habits, it is the reverse. The immediate outcome is unpleasant, sweating at the gym, but the ultimate outcome is positive. To get a habit to stick, you need to feel successful, even if it's in a small way. The feeling of success is a signal that your habit paid off and that the work was worth the effort. The solution is to add a little bit of immediate pleasure to the habits that pay off in the long run. Clear calls this reinforcement. Reinforcement ties your habit to an immediate reward, which makes it satisfying when you finish. Consider the story of a man who wanted to stop eating out so much. He opened a savings account and labeled it Trip to Europe. Every time he skipped a restaurant meal and cooked at home, he transferred $50 into that account. At the end of the year, he had saved enough money for the trip. But more importantly, he got an immediate reward every time he cooked. Seeing the balance go up gave him a hit of satisfaction right now, not just in the future. This is why toothpaste has mint flavoring. Mint doesn't clean your teeth. Detergents and abrasives clean your teeth. But mint creates a cool, tingling sensation. It tells your brain, it worked, my mouth is clean. Without that immediate satisfaction, very few people would brush their teeth. If you are trying to write, allow yourself a small treat, like a cup of good coffee or a walk, immediately after you finish your word count. If you are trying to work out, use a habit tracker, which we will discuss next, to get the satisfaction of crossing off the day. The key is that the reward must be aligned with your identity. You can't reward a workout with a bowl of ice cream because that conflicts with the identity of being a healthy person.
Instead, reward a workout with a massage or a new piece of workout gear. The first 3 laws, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The 4th law, make it satisfying, increases the odds that a behavior will be repeated next time.
Chapter 16. How to stick with good habits every day. In 1993, a bank in Abbotsford, Canada, hired a 23-year-old stockbroker named Trent Dyersmith. He was a rookie. The bank was small, and the location was obscure. No one expected much from him. But Dyersmith had a secret weapon. It wasn't a complex algorithm or a vast network of contacts. It was 2 jars. Every morning, he placed 2 jars on his desk. The one on the left was filled with 120 paper clips. The one on the right was empty. As soon as he sat down, he would make a sales call. Immediately after hanging up the phone, he would move 1 paperclip from the full jar to the empty jar. Then he would dial the next number. He would not stop until he had moved all 120 paper clips to the second jar. Within 18 months, Dyersmith was bringing in $5 million in assets to the firm. By age 24, he was making $75,000 a year, the equivalent of $125,000 today. He eventually landed a 6-figure job with another firm. He called this the paperclip strategy. This simple technique illustrates the power of a habit tracker. A habit tracker is a simple way to measure whether you did a habit. The most basic format is to get a calendar and cross off each day you stick to your routine. Jerry Seinfeld, the famous comedian, used this strategy. He said his goal was to write jokes every single day. He put a huge wall calendar on a prominent wall in his house. For every day that he wrote a joke, he put a big red X over that day. After a few days, you have a chain. Just keep at it, and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job next is to not break the chain. Don't break the chain is a powerful mantra.
Don't break the chain of sales calls, and you'll build a book of business.
Don't break the chain of workouts and you'll get fit faster than you'd expect. Habit tracking works because it leverages multiple laws of behavior change simultaneously. First, it makes the habit obvious. Recording your last action creates a trigger that can initiate your next one. The calendar is a visual cue. When you walk into the room and see the chain of X's, you are reminded to act. Research shows that people who track their progress on goals like losing weight, lowering blood pressure, and quitting smoking are all more likely to improve than those who don't. Second, it makes the habit attractive. The most effective form of motivation is progress. When we get a signal that we are moving forward, we become more motivated to continue down that path. In this way, habit tracking can have an addictive quality. Each small win feeds your desire. Seeing the paper clips pile up in the jar is satisfying. It is proof of your hard work. Third, it makes the habit satisfying. This is the most crucial benefit. Tracking is its own reward. It feels good to cross an item off your to-do list. It feels good to complete the entry in your workout log. It feels good to watch the X on the calendar grow. The habit tracker provides immediate satisfaction, even if the actual rewards of the habit, like losing weight, are delayed. However, there is a dark side to tracking. We can become obsessed with the number rather than the purpose behind it. This is known as Goodhart's law. It states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If a teacher is paid based on how well students do on a standardized test, the teacher will stop teaching to educate and start teaching to the test. The measure, the test score, becomes the target, and the education suffers. If you focus too much on the number on the scale, you might starve yourself or dehydrate yourself just to see the number go down. You are hitting the target, but missing the point of being healthy. Furthermore, life happens. No matter how consistent you are, you will eventually break the chain. You will get sick. You will have to travel. You will have a family emergency. This brings us to the most important rule of habit recovery. Never miss twice. If you miss one day, try to get back on track as quickly as possible. Missing one workout happens, but I'm not going to miss two. Missing one healthy meal happens, but I'm not going to miss two. The first mistake is never the one that ruins you. It is the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. This is a distinguishing feature between winners and losers. Anyone can have a bad performance, a bad workout, or a bad day at work. But when successful people fail, they rebound quickly. The breaking of a habit doesn't matter if the reclaiming of it is fast. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. Think of it like a vote. If you cast a vote for a bad habit, missing a day, it's not the end of the election. You just need to make sure the next vote is for the good habit. You can still win the election with 51% of the vote. So get a calendar, get a jar of paper clips, track your habits. But remember, the goal is not the X on the calendar. The goal is the person you become by showing up. Chapter 17. How an accountability partner can change everything. We have discussed how to make good habits satisfying using rewards. But what about bad habits? How do we make them unsatisfying? The inversion of the fourth law of behavior change is make it unsatisfying. We are less likely to repeat a bad habit if it is painful or unsatisfying. However, there is a catch. As we discussed in the previous chapters, the human brain prioritizes the present moment. For a punishment to be effective, it must be immediate. The threat of lung cancer 20 years from now is not enough to stop a smoker today. The pain is too distant.
The threat of being broke in retirement is not enough to stop a shopper today. To eliminate a bad habit, we need to add an immediate cost to the action. James Clear illustrates this with a rather graphic but powerful idea proposed by Roger Fisher, a strategist who worked on nuclear deterrence. During the Cold War, Fisher noticed that the President of the United States had access to the nuclear launch codes at all times. If the president wanted to launch a nuclear weapon that would kill millions of people, he simply had to pick up a phone and give the code. It was an abstract, antiseptic process. He would never see the victims. He would never feel the pain. Fisher proposed a solution to make the cost immediate. He suggested that the nuclear launch codes be placed inside a small capsule. This capsule would then be surgically implanted next to the heart of a volunteer. The volunteer would carry a heavy butcher knife and accompany the president everywhere.
If the president ever wanted to launch nuclear weapons, he would first have to take the knife, kill the volunteer with his own hands, and cut the capsule out of his chest.
He would have to look at a human being and murder them before he could murder millions. He would have to see blood on the White House carpet. Fisher argued that this would make the cost of nuclear war real. When faced with that immediate, visceral reality, would the president still push the button? Probably not. While we don't need to go to such extremes, the principle holds true. Behavior changes when the pain of the behavior is immediate. Currently, your bad habits are too easy. You skip a workout and nothing happens. You check your phone during dinner and nobody says anything. We can change this by creating a habit contract. A habit contract is a verbal or written agreement in which you state your commitment to a particular habit and the penalty that will occur if you fail to follow through. Then you find one or two people to act as your accountability partners and sign off on the contract. Clear shares the story of an entrepreneur named Brian Harris. Harris wanted to lose weight, but he knew he lacked the discipline to do it alone. So he drafted a terrifyingly specific habit contract. First, he set the goal: lose nearly 30 pounds in 3 months. Then he set the daily habits: write down all food intake, weigh himself every morning. Then he set the punishment. If he failed to track his food for a day, he would have to pay his trainer $200. If he failed to weigh himself, he would have to pay his wife $500. And the ultimate penalty? If he failed to reach his goal by the end of the quarter, he would have to dress up as a girl and run down the street while his business partner filmed him. He signed the contract. His wife signed it. His trainer signed it. The result? He followed the plan perfectly.
The fear of losing money and the fear of public humiliation was an immediate cost that outweighed the immediate pleasure of eating junk food. This works because we are social animals. We care deeply about what others think of us. We want to be liked. We want to be respected. When you have an accountability partner, you add a social cost to your behavior. If you promise your friend that you will meet them at the gym at 6 a.m., you are much more likely to show up. Not because you want to work out, but because you don't want to be the kind of person who flakes on a friend. You don't want to be seen as unreliable or lazy. Even a simple text message can work. Find a friend and agree to text each other every day when you finish your habit. I just read 10 pages. I just finished my run. Knowing that someone is waiting for that text can be the difference between doing it and skipping it. To make bad habits unsatisfying, your best option is to make them painful in the moment. And nothing is more painful to the human ego than losing money or losing face. This concludes the 4 laws of behavior change. We have covered the fundamental tools you need to build a system of habits. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. But the journey is not over. The final section of the book is dedicated to advanced tactics. Once you have built a habit, how do you master it? How do you go from being good to being truly great? And how do you handle the dark side of habits when they start to hold you back? Advanced tactics: how to go from being merely good to being truly great. Chapter 18: The Truth About Talent, When Genes Matter and When They Don't. Michael Phelps is widely considered the greatest swimmer in history. He has won more Olympic medals than any other athlete. Hicham El Guerrouj is one of the greatest runners in history. He holds the world record in the mile and the 1500 meters. Both men are incredible athletes.
But if you put them side by side, they look like they belong to different species. Michael Phelps stands 6 feet 4 inches tall. He has a massive torso and comparatively short legs. This build is perfect for swimming. His long torso acts like the hull of a canoe, and his short legs reduce drag in the water. Hicham El Guerrouj is 5 feet 9 inches tall. He has an incredibly short torso and long, spindly legs. This build is perfect for running. His long legs allow for a massive stride, and his light frame makes it easier to carry his weight over long distances. Now, imagine if they switched sports. If Michael Phelps tried to be an Olympic distance runner, he would fail. At 194 pounds, he is simply too heavy. His short legs would be a liability. He would not just be slower than El Guerrouj, he would likely not even qualify for the elite level. Conversely, if El Guerrouj tried to swim, he would be a disaster. His long legs would create massive drag. His short torso would provide no power. He would be literally fighting his own anatomy in the pool. This comparison illustrates a fundamental truth that is often uncomfortable to discuss. Genes matter. In the world of self-improvement, we like to believe that anyone can be anything. We like to believe that with enough hard work, you can become Michael Phelps. But the reality is that genes provide a powerful advantage in favorable circumstances and a serious disadvantage in unfavorable circumstances. Genes do not determine your destiny. They determine your areas of opportunity. James Clear argues that the secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition. This is as true for habits as it is for sports. Habits are easier to perform and more satisfying to stick with when they align with your natural inclinations. If you are a social butterfly, trying to build a habit of solitary meditation in a dark room might be torture.
But building a habit of hosting a weekly dinner party might be effortless. If you are deeply introverted, a habit of networking at crowded conferences might be exhausting, but a habit of writing thoughtful emails to colleagues might be sustainable. You cannot escape your biology, but you can direct it. The most successful people do not try to fix their weaknesses, they try to exploit their strengths. They play a game where the odds are in their favor. But how do you find that game? How do you know what your strengths are? Clear suggests a strategy known in computer science as the explore-exploit trade-off. When you are starting out, you should be in explore mode. Try everything. Try lifting weights. Try running. Try writing. Try coding. Try sales. Cast a wide net. Once you find something that you are naturally good at, something that comes a little easier to you than it does to others, you switch to exploit mode. You double down. You focus your energy there. But how do you know when you've found it? Clear offers a few questions to ask yourself. 1. What feels like fun to me, but work to others? The mark of a natural fit is that the activity doesn't feel like a chore. You can do it for hours while others get bored after 20 minutes. For Michael Phelps, staring at the black line on the bottom of a pool for 6 hours a day was bearable. For most people, it would be mental torture. 2. What makes me lose track of time? Flow is the state of being so immersed in an activity that the rest of the world fades away. Flow happens most often when the challenge of the task perfectly matches your skill level. If you find yourself looking up and realizing 4 hours have passed, you have likely found your zone. 3. Where do I get greater returns than the average person? If you and a friend both study for the same amount of time, but you get an A and he gets a C, you have a natural aptitude for that subject. We aren't looking for fairness here. We are looking for leverage.
4. What comes naturally to me? Forget what you were taught. Forget what society says is cool. Look at what you actually do when no one is watching. Genes are not an excuse to not work hard. In fact, they are the reason to work hard. They tell you exactly where to apply your effort. Michael Phelps did not become a champion by relying on his genes alone. He trained harder than anyone else, but he applied that hard work to a domain where his genes gave him a multiplier effect. If you can't find a game where the odds are in your favor, create one. Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, admits he is not the funniest person in the world. He is not the best artist in the world. He is not the best businessman in the world, but he is above average at all three. By combining them, humor, art, and business, he created a niche where he was the best in the world. He redefined the game to suit his specific stack of talents. The lesson of this chapter is to stop fighting against the grain of your own nature. Work hard on the things that come easy. Chapter 19, The Goldilocks Rule, How to Stay Motivated in Life and Work. In 1955, Disneyland had just opened in Anaheim, California. A 10-year-old boy named Steve Martin got a job there selling guidebooks for 50 cents. He wasn't a performer yet. He was just a kid working at a theme park, but he was watching. He watched the comedians who performed at the Golden Horseshoe Revue. He watched the magicians in the magic shop. He watched the way they interacted with the crowd. Eventually, he started trying to perform himself. He learned a few magic tricks. He learned how to juggle. He started stealing jokes from the professionals. By the time he was in his 20s, he was performing in small clubs, but he wasn't great. His act was disjointed. He would play the banjo, tell a joke, and do a magic trick. Sometimes the audience laughed. Sometimes they stared at him in silence. But Steve Martin did something very specific. He didn't quit, but he also didn't just repeat the same act for 10 years. He constantly tweaked it. He looked for the edge. He was always trying to find material that was just a little bit better than what he had done the night before. He said, "I did stand-up comedy for 18 years. 10 of those years were spent learning.
4 years were spent refining, and 4 were spent in wild success. By the mid-1970s, Steve Martin was the biggest stand-up comedian in the world. He was selling out stadiums. His journey illustrates a critical component of maintaining motivation. How do you stay interested in a habit for 18 years? How do you keep going when the initial excitement fades? The answer lies in what psychologists call the Goldilocks rule. The Goldilocks rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. Imagine you are playing a game of tennis. If you play against a 4-year-old child, you will quickly become bored.
The match is too easy. There is no challenge. You will win every point. Your brain will disengage. But now imagine you play against a professional like Roger Federer or Serena Williams. You will quickly lose motivation for a different reason. The match is too hard. You will never score a point. You will be crushed. Your brain will realize that success is impossible, and it will give up. But now, imagine you play against someone who is your equal. Maybe they are just slightly better than you. You win a few points, you lose a few points. You have a chance to win, but only if you really try. This is the sweet spot. Your focus narrows, distractions fade away. You find yourself fully immersed in the task. This state of total immersion is what researchers call flow. Flow is the experience of being in the zone, and flow only happens when the challenge perfectly matches the skill. This is the secret to maintaining motivation over the long term. When you start a new habit, it is important to keep the behavior easy so you can stick with it. But once the habit is established, it is important to slowly increase the difficulty. If you keep doing the same easy workout for 5 years, you'll get bored. You need to add weight. You need to run faster. You need to learn a new lift. You need to push the boundary of your ability just enough to stay engaged. This brings us to the second major threat to habit consistency. We often think that the enemy of success is failure. We think we quit because we fail. But James Clear argues that the true enemy of success is not failure. It is boredom. As our habits become ordinary, they become less interesting. We get bored with the repetition. We get bored with the diet. We get bored with the job. And when we get bored, we start looking for novelty. We start looking for a new workout program, a new business idea, a new diet. We jump from one thing to the next, never staying with anything long enough to master it.
This is what separates the professionals from the amateurs. Anyone can work hard when they feel motivated. Anyone can go to the gym when they are excited about a new program. Anyone can write when the inspiration strikes. But what happens when the excitement is gone? What happens when the work becomes repetitive? What happens when it is raining and you don't feel like running? The amateur quits. The amateur waits for the feeling of motivation to return. The professional shows up anyway. The greatest threat to success is not that you will fail, but that you will quit when it gets boring. Stepping up when it is annoying or painful or draining to do so, that is what makes the difference between a professional and an amateur. The only way to become excellent is to be endlessly fascinated by doing the same thing over and over. You have to fall in love with boredom. There is no magic pill that makes the work easy forever. There is no hack that eliminates the need for grit. At some point, it comes down to who can handle the boredom training every day, doing the same lifts over and over and over. If you want to be truly great, you have to accept that your habits will not always be exciting. They will not always be a thrill, but you do them anyway. You find the sweet spot of difficulty to keep yourself engaged, and when that fails, you rely on your identity as a professional to carry you through the mud. Chapter 20: The Downside of Creating Good Habits. We have spent this entire book arguing for the power of habits. We have discussed how they automate your life, how they free up mental energy, and how they compound into massive results. But now, at the very end, we must discuss the danger. The benefits of habits are obvious. We can do things without thinking. The downside of habits is that you get used to doing things a certain way and stop paying attention to little errors. You assume you're getting better because you're gaining experience.
In reality, you're often merely reinforcing your current habits, not improving them. In fact, some research has shown that once a skill has been mastered, there's usually a slight decline in performance over time. Usually, this mindlessness is fine. It is good that you don't have to think about how to tie your shoes or brush your teeth. But when you want to maximize your potential and achieve elite levels of performance, you need a different approach. You can't just repeat the same thing blindly and expect to become world-class. This brings us to a crucial formula. Habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. To become great, certain skills do need to become automatic. You don't want a basketball player thinking about the mechanics of dribbling while he is bringing the ball up the court. You want the dribbling to be automatic so he can focus on the strategy of the play. But once one habit is automatic, you cannot just coast. You must build the next habit on top of it, and you must constantly look for ways to improve the old one. Mastery is the process of narrowing your focus to a tiny element of success, repeating it until you have internalized the skill, and then using this new habit as the foundation to advance to the next frontier of your development. The danger arises when we confuse doing it for a long time with mastery. Driving a car is a habit for most adults. We have done it for decades, but most of us are not Formula One drivers. In fact, most of us are no better at driving today than we were 5 years ago. We are just on autopilot.
To prevent this slide into complacency, we need a system for reflection and review. Reflection and review is the process that allows you to remain conscious of your performance over time. The most successful organizations and athletes all have some version of this. The Los Angeles Lakers didn't just play basketball games. After every game, Pat Riley would review the game film. He tracked specific metrics for every player, not just points, but effort points, like diving for loose balls or boxing out for rebounds. He forced the players to see the reality of their performance, not just the feeling of it. Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon runner, takes notes after every single practice. He reviews his training to see where he can improve by a fraction of a percent. James Clear applies this to his own life with 2 annual rituals. First, the annual review. Every December, he looks back at the previous year. He tallies his workout numbers. He looks at how many articles he wrote. He looks at the places he visited. Then he asks 3 questions. What went well this year? What didn't go so well this year? What did I learn? This forces him to look at the data. It forces him to see where his habits remain strong and where they slipped. Second, the integrity report. Every summer, he conducts a second review, but this one is not about productivity. It is about values. He asks himself, what are the core values that drive my life and work? How am I living and working with integrity right now? How can I set a higher standard in the future? This prevents the tunnel vision of habits. It prevents him from becoming so focused on making money or getting fit that he becomes a bad person or a negligent partner. Reflection and review offer the antidote to the laziness of habits. They drag you back to awareness. They force you to look at the effort points. But there is one final downside to habits that is perhaps the most dangerous of all: identity rigidity.
In the beginning, building a habit creates a new identity. I am a runner. I am a writer. This is good. It helps you stick to the habit. But over time, this identity can become a prison. If you tie your entire sense of self to being the CEO, what happens when you sell the company or get fired? You have an identity crisis. You crumble. If you tie your self-worth to being a soldier, what happens when you leave the service? If you tie your identity to being an athlete, what happens when you get injured? The more you let a single belief define you, the less capable you are of adapting when life challenges you. Clear argues that we must keep our identity flexible. We must avoid making any single aspect of our identity an overwhelming portion of who we are. Instead of saying, I am an athlete, say, I am the type of person who is mentally tough and loves a physical challenge. This definition works whether you are playing in the NFL or rehabbing a knee injury. Instead of saying, I am a CEO, say, I am the type of person who builds and creates things. This definition works whether you are running a Fortune 500 company or building a treehouse for your kids. Everything is impermanent. Life is constantly changing, so you need to periodically check in to see if your old habits and beliefs are still serving you. A lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote. Conclusion: the secret to results that last. We have reached the end of our journey through Atomic Habits. We started with the story of a high school baseball player with a broken nose trying to put his life back together. We ended with the nuanced tactics of elite performers and the philosophy of identity. Throughout this audio experience, we have dissected the anatomy of habit formation. We learned that small changes, atomic habits,
are not merely small, they are the fundamental units of a larger system. They compound over time, creating massive results from 1% improvements.
We learned that true change is not about setting goals. It is about building systems. It is not about what you want to achieve. It is about who you wish to become. We explored the 4 laws of behavior change, the toolkit for mastering your psychology. Make it obvious, the cues. Make it attractive, the craving. Make it easy, the response. Make it satisfying, the reward. And we learned how to invert these laws to break the chains of bad habits. But if there is one single lesson to take away from this book, it is this. Success is not a goal to reach or a finish line to cross. It is a system to improve, an endless process to refine. There is no finish line. You do not win at health. You do not win at business. You do not win at life. You simply play the game. The secret to getting results that last is to never stop making improvements. It is remarkable what you can build if you just don't stop. It is remarkable the business you can build if you don't stop working. It is remarkable the body you can build if you don't stop training. It is remarkable the knowledge you can build if you don't stop learning. It is remarkable the fortune you can build if you don't stop saving. Small habits don't add up. They compound. That is the power of atomic habits. Tiny changes, remarkable results. This concludes the audio insights for Atomic Habits by James Clear.